In Florida, incumbent Governor Ron DeSantis and challenger Congressman Charlie Crist sparred in the one and only debate of their race.
He wants to run for president, and he's out of state raising all this money.
The only worn-out old donkey I'm looking to put out to pasture is Charlie Crist.
Some fiery moments there last night from the Florida governor's debate. Welcome to Red and Blue. I'm Ed O'Keefe at CBS News in Washington. Thank you once again for joining us. We are just 2 weeks away from midterm election day. And tonight across the country, another key debate night in America. We'll get to that in a moment. But we want to begin with yet another CBS News Battleground Tracker poll out today. Once again, tracking things in the important battleground of Pennsylvania and its important U.S. Senate race between Democrat John Fetterman and Republican Mehmet Oz. Fetterman is leading by just 2 points, but well within the margin of error. Candidates are also squaring off in their only debate of the campaign season tonight. We have two of my CBS News colleagues to break down this race. Executive Director of Elections and Surveys Anthony Salvanto is in New York, and Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent Robert Costa is in Pennsylvania. We'll get to Bob in a moment, but let's turn first to Anthony for our latest polling on this high-stakes race. Anthony, walk us through the numbers.
Hey there, Ed, and I like that you said yet another, because we are definitely listening to a lot of voters in a lot of these states. Look, this is closer than it was a month ago. It was 5 points. Now it's 2. And one big reason that we noted for that is Republicans coming home, which is to say, in September, Oz was getting 87% of Republicans. Now he's getting 94%. One big factor behind that might be the negative ads give cover to partisans who would otherwise be inclined to come home back to the party's candidate. They're not necessarily more enthusiastic about Oz. In fact, they're not. But now they're voting for him in larger numbers anyhow, Ed.
The issues of this race are beginning to mirror a lot of what we've seen in some other swing states. Crime factoring into this contest now. Give us a sense of how it is there in Pennsylvania.
It is. Two things. One is that it's very important for Republicans, which echoes what I had just said about the idea of playing to your base. If it's important for Republicans, it gives Republicans a reason to come back home for their candidate. Less so for others. And then I want to show you this. What is it that's important to hear in tonight's debate? We asked voters. It's the economy and inflation. Maybe no surprise there. It is, to your point, 91% their views on police and crime, and then also, of course, plans for lowering gas prices. I will add, Ed, it's notable what's not here on this list. Fetterman's health, Oz's residency. The candidates have been going back and forth on those topics, but it's really those pocketbook issues. It's the economy that people want to hear about, Ed.
They don't want to hear the attacks anymore. Anthony Salvanto, more evidence that big races are tightening all across the country. We thank you. You can see more of those results, of course, at CBSNews.com. Let's turn now to Pennsylvania and bring in Robert Costa. Robert, Bob, good to see you outside the state capitol there in Harrisburg. Lay it out for us. This remains one of the most, perhaps the most, important Senate race in the country. And, you know, big day today, obviously, with this debate forthcoming.
Ed, good to be with you from Harrisburg, the state capitol. This is a critical Senate debate, not just for Dr. Mehmet Oz, the Republican nominee, and John Fetterman, the Democratic lieutenant governor, and his party's nominee, but for both parties in Washington. Power in Congress, power in the Senate on the line. This is the first and only debate in this Senate race. Fetterman in our CBS News poll is slightly ahead, but the race is a dead heat. It's a toss-up. And you have Fetterman facing questions about his health from some voters and from Oz's campaign in recent months since he suffered a stroke in May. He will be using a closed captioning device, which is part of the recovery process for others, including Fetterman, who have suffered a stroke. And that will be part of the process of the debate tonight. And Dr. Oz, he's been hammering issues like crime and the economy during his campaign.
What was quite notable today, Bob, is the fact that the Fetterman campaign, in essence, went there and talked about the fact that the candidate will be using auditory assistance devices tonight, closed captioning, in essence, issuing a memo to reporters that said, point blank, this debate is unprecedented. There's never been a closed caption political debate in a high-profile Senate race where one of the candidates is dealing with a lingering auditory processing challenging while recovering from a stroke. They know that what transpires tonight has the real potential to turn this contest and to convince those few undecideds left to perhaps think otherwise if something were to go wrong. And they make the point later, a reminder, if people need one, Dr. Oz is a reality TV star who spent plenty of time on live television. In essence, they're trying to lower expectations, right?
Ed, I would frame it as they're setting expectations. Ever since Fetterman suffered a stroke in May, he has been dealing with challenges on the campaign trail. Dr. Oz's campaign has pushed Fetterman to disclose more medical records, more medical information. Fetterman had his doctor recently release a letter in which he said he could fully do the job of senator, that he's ready to serve. Fetterman and his campaign have hoped that that would quiet some of these questions about his health. But you're right, that is a very revealing pre-debate memo, because you have the Fetterman campaign trying to say this is where we stand in terms of this particular challenge. We want to bring it back to the issues of Dr. Oz, his record as a healthcare personality, and bring it back to the issues.
And speaking of those issues, when you talk to voters there in the state, do they tell you essentially what our poll suggests, that the economy, inflation, crime are top-of-mind concerns?
It depends on who you speak to. We spent the weekend in State College, Pennsylvania, Penn State University, in that beautiful town nestled near Mount Nittany, and you saw a lot of people there talking about abortion as well as the economy and crime. A lot of young people in State College, Pennsylvania, and some of the cities and suburbs across Pennsylvania and across the country have put that issue at the fore after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade earlier this year. But again and again, whether it's a young voter in State College or an older voter here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, it's the economy, high prices on fuel and food, that really is the kitchen table issue, the voting issue for Pennsylvanians.
Did you get any ice cream while you were in State College? Because that creamery
actually,
is...
They had Berkey Creamery. They served it in the press box. We tried not to indulge too much, but we had a little.
I don't blame you. And, of course, the other big race in that state is the governor's race. Josh Shapiro, the Democrat, who appears to be comfortably ahead of Republican Doug Mastriano. What does he have to do the next 2 weeks? Just keep his head down and hope nothing happens that upsets his apple cart?
Trying to be kind of realistic.
We spoke to Shapiro, the Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, yesterday, and he believes he's running a campaign that's going to win over moderate Republicans. And if you drive around Pennsylvania, you see billboards everywhere that say, I'm a conservative, I'm a Republican, I support gun rights, and I'm voting for Josh Shapiro. So Shapiro's trying to build up his margin in Pennsylvania by not just getting the core Democratic voter, but getting that moderate Republican voter in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, who might be wary of State Senator Doug Mastriano, his links to former President Trump, and wary of Mastriano's efforts to overturn the 2020 election in Pennsylvania. And the former president's shadow hovers over the gubernatorial contest and all races in Pennsylvania. In September, CBS News has learned Trump had a meeting talking about changing Act 77, repealing the mail-in voting law in Pennsylvania. So his fingerprints are on Pennsylvania as well as this debate is about to kick off in just a couple hours.
Well, Robert Costa, we know you'll be there watching it tonight, recapping it tomorrow. Thank you. And I'm glad you partook of the ice cream, because that's what we should do when we're out there.
Ed.
Enjoy this stuff. All right. Pennsylvania isn't the only state with a high-stakes debate tonight. In New York, for example, the only face-to-face encounter for Democratic Governor Kathy Hochul and her Republican challenger, Congressman Lee Zeldin, happens. Out in Michigan, Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer will debate Republican challenger Tudor Dixon. And in Colorado, one of those U.S. Senate campaigns that Republicans would like to see creep into the top-tier battlegrounds, Democratic Senator Michael Bennet faces his Republican opponent, Joe O'Dea. There will also be a debate for a tight race tonight in Virginia's 2nd Congressional District. A recent poll has incumbent Democratic Congresswoman Elaine Luria tied with Republican opponent Jen Kiggins. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland's following the race and joins us now from Virginia Beach. Scott, good to see you. I know part of the reason you're there is not only is this one of the 4 dozen or so battleground House districts across the country, but Luria, of course, is a member of the January 6th committee. Has it been a factor in her race? Go ahead. No, go ahead. Has it been a factor?
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. It's the race among the January 6th committee members that's competitive, the only of the 9 committee members to face a tough general election. At face value, on the surface, Ed, this looks and feels like any other competitive U.S. House race on the map. But when you get to that issue of election integrity, the January 6th committee, it electroshocks this race into something quite different. We've seen it in the ads, we've seen it in the first debate, and we expect to see it in the second debate tonight. Elaine Luria, running to preserve this seat, her hold on this seat that she won in 2018, is competing against State Senator Jen Kiggans. When they reach the issue of the January 6th committee, the tenor changes. It becomes fiercer. It becomes more ferocious. In the ads and in the debate, Kiggans is hitting Luria for the same thing many Republicans are hitting Democratic incumbents for being too closely aligned with President Biden, for having some culpability for inflation and the economic woes. And Luria is tagging Kiggans for the same things we've heard other Democrats hit Republican challengers for abortion rights positions and for not having a plan to get America out of the inflationary cycle. But then, at the first debate, Luria called Kiggans an election denier, and then quite forcefully leaned into her argument that her position on the January 6th committee is to protect democracy at a time democracy's in peril. And Kiggans is of the camp that even in Virginia, there are questions about the integrity of the 2020 elections. We'll expect that to be an issue at the debates and in some of the closing ads. But for voters, during a time of inflation, amid concerns about crime and immigration, no indication yet that's cutting through as a primary issue that could move voters in a transcendent way here more than elsewhere.
And Scott, this is a heavy military and port district, obviously there on the coast of Virginia. Is there a way that they adapt the inflation or economic arguments in that part of the country, given the makeup of the district?
Yes, and we're seeing that. There's been this tendency from some Democratic incumbents to pump the brakes on touting all the money, all the bacon you've brought home, because there's a criticism that this government spending could be fueling the inflationary cycle. But here, near Virginia Beach, Newport News, the Hampton Roads area, with all the military and the military voters, Elaine Luria is touting her accomplishments, getting a military pay raise and getting billions in federal funding for military projects. A different type of bring home the bacon message that might resonate more in this area with so many military voters and communities, even all the way here to Virginia Beach, where, Ed, we are quite confident it could and should be 40 degrees warmer.
Is Ocean Eddy still open at least? Behind you?
Oh, yeah. And by the way, let Costa know there's ice cream here, too, and we're going to do just fine ourselves tonight.
Real quick, Luria is one of those national security Democrats who was elected in 2018, former military, former CIA officers. That's part of her appeal, right? That she's somebody who, in essence, could have been working alongside her constituents back in the day.
It really worked in 2018, and that's the point that Kiggans is using to counterpunch, saying somebody with a military background shouldn't be so closely aligned with the president that the Republicans criticize for the withdrawal from Afghanistan. It's a potent counter issue as well.
Scott McFarland there on the beautiful beaches of Virginia Beach. We appreciate you taking the time and taking the hardship assignment of having to spend the day there by the shore. Take care. In Florida's debate last night between incumbent Republican Governor Ron DeSantis and his Democratic challenger Charlie Crist, one of the standout moments had to do more with another campaign cycle than this one. We'll explain next. You're streaming Red and Blue, reporting across the political divide.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
Yoga and wellness has become a place of anti-science.
Online clickbait.
The algorithms feed you content based upon your own fantasy.
Potentially at my peril.
There's no question about it.
Spreading digital disinformation.
Their entire yoga studio and spiritual community got so embedded in all of the QAnon stuff that it became this sick place.
Why pro-health people are fertile ground for anti-science messages.
We can just go into the whole mask thing. A lot of us just believe that's symbolism for silencing people.
People are locked in this mindset. They've been taught to accept what the medical doctors say.
No longer are you going to be willing to take any medical advice.
It's a big problem that we urgently need to address.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now. an original CBS Reports documentary.
We need to put an end to this territorial status.
Will statehood create a better Puerto Rico?
So that we have the same quality of life that you see in the States.
What do you worry about?
Me living here in the future?
They're giving incentives to non-Puerto Ricans to come to Puerto Rico
and extract our natural resources and take over our land.
Vacation in Puerto Rico, and in exchange for that, you don't pay taxes.
Why would I allow somebody who abused me for 123 years to then consume me?
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
When weather turns extreme,
massive and rapidly intensifying hurricane,
every second counts.
Hurricane Fiona slams Puerto Rico with flooding and power outages.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Well over 9 feet. This is not survivable.
You'll have time to get prepared.
You want to have the advantage on severe weather days.
It just may save your life.
Feel the forecast. Weather when it matters most on CBS Mornings.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
We are so excited, we just can't hide it.
CBS mornings are, well, everything your morning should be.
Let's do it!
Let's go!
CBS Mornings, starting at 7.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Ed O'Keefe. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis faced off against Democratic challenger Charlie Crist in the state's only gubernatorial debate Monday night. The current and former governors of the Sunshine State, because Crist is a former governor trying to be governor again, sparred over a number of issues, including the economy, abortion, and immigration. Crist attacked Governor DeSantis' highly publicized decision to fly dozens of migrants to Martha's Vineyard.
I thought what the governor did was a horrible political stunt. You know, we have an immigration problem. We have a problem at the border. We need to secure the border. I agree with all of that. But it doesn't mean that you use Florida taxpayers' dollars to charter 2 jets.
You say you're for the secure border, but this is all happening under the Biden administration and the policies that Charlie Crist supports. We've had millions and millions of people pour in across illegally.
Joining us now is CBS News correspondent Enrique Acevedo from Miami, yet another political correspondent along the Atlantic seaboard tonight. Enrique, thank you for continuing the theme. This was the one and only debate for the gubernatorial candidates there in Florida. Is there anybody left to be convinced in the state as to how they should vote? And what effect might it have had on, say, for example, Hispanic voters there in South Florida?
Well, I think it's surprising for most people to realize that, according to many polls released this week, Governor DeSantis is a favorite among Latino voters in this state, Ed. Latino voters in Florida are probably the most diverse segment of the electorate, the most diverse group of Latinos in the entire country, really. You have representation, of course, from the very conservative Cuban-American community, but more and more Puerto Ricans that moved from the island to Florida after Hurricane Maria, people coming from Colombia, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Mexican Americans like myself. So it's a really interesting mix of Latino voters. And I think what is most interesting about that is that the state is less Cuban American, as Cuban American voters are diluted because of this surge in the number of new Latino voters from other countries. The state is trending even more conservative. So that's part of what we found out yesterday and through these polls this week, where Governor DeSantis is getting the majority of support from Latino voters.
You know, there was a theory once the governor authorized these immigration trips to Martha's Vineyard that by targeting Venezuelans specifically, it could adversely affect his standing with the growing Venezuelan population there in South Florida. Have you seen any evidence of that, or does this poll that came out yesterday from our friends at Telemundo perhaps suggest it had no bearing on his support among Latinos in the state?
Well, I think it remains to be seen, right? You're talking about Venezuelan Americans, for example, an important vote for President Trump in 2020. To give you an idea of how important that was, in 2016 in the city of Doral, which is a bastion of the Venezuelan American community, Hillary Clinton won by more than 40%. After engaging with the issue of Venezuela, inviting President Guaidó, the considered legitimate president of Venezuela by the Trump administration, to his State of the Union by promising to pressure the Maduro regime, Trump was able to flip that district, well, that city specifically, by 2%. So I think Venezuelan American voters believe in the Republican approach to the issue of Venezuela, and we'll see if that withstands what we've seen from Governor DeSantis in terms of his handling of Venezuelan asylum seekers and refugees trying to reach the U.S.
I know one of the things you've been tracking very closely for us, especially from your perch there in Miami, is misinformation in Spanish, or misinformation generally about issues like socialism. And there is an example airing there now from Congresswoman Maria Elvira Salazar, who's facing criticism for condemning socialism in a new ad.
That's correct. Well, to give you an idea of how important the Latino vote is in this election, Ed, and we see all sorts of figures and data about that. But the one that I think stands out to me is since 2018, there's been an increase of around 4.7 million Latino eligible voters. That represents 62% of the total increase in eligible voters in the country, in the U.S. That's why, as the number of Latino voters increases and it appears to be more of a swing vote than it was in the past, we see more interest from candidates from both parties trying to reach these voters, trying to get those votes. Part of that effort, unfortunately, comes in the form of disinformation. When you're referring to Maria Elvira Salazar, who's in a very contested district, Florida 27, she's been criticized for using this sort of narrative or political rhetoric that Democrats are now socialists, Marxists, trying to take the U.S. in the same path that Maduro has taken Venezuela or the Castros in Cuba. She says that's not the case, and she insists that there is evidence of that. But of course, we see this very effective messaging around socialism go work with voters not just here in Florida, but well beyond the state.
I think we have part of her ad that we can show people that's garnered the criticism, so why don't we play that?
My parents lost their country to socialism. Over my dead body will we lose ours.
So there it is, in essence, saying if you give it back to Democrats, they're going to lead us into socialism.
Yeah, that's a personal issue for a lot of the Latino voters here in Florida that come from places like Cuba, like Venezuela, like Nicaragua, even other places around Latin America where socialism basically destroyed their lives, at least that form of socialism. And for them, it's hard to be nuanced about the term and understand that there are other interpretations and there have been other sorts of approaches to socialism because their experience is very personal. And I think Republicans have been sensitive to that and have used that, exploited that, unfortunately in many ways, to also get those voters to support them.
In the 20 seconds or so we have left, Charlie Crist brought up the fact that Ron DeSantis is in essence preparing to run for president after this election cycle. You get a sense that Florida voters care at all and want him to serve a full 4-year term?
I get the sense that most Florida voters suspect that Governor DeSantis has presidential aspirations. So I don't know if that's going to be really making a difference in the election coming up for governor here in the state.
We'll see. It seems they might not mind if he wins, indeed. All right, Enrique Acevedo there in beautiful Miami, Florida. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ed.
Hundreds of candidates on the ballot this November are sowing doubt about the last national election. We'll show you the few places they are not running. Next, you're streaming Red and Blue.
Thinking about it, Everybody wakes up in the morning and they are pelted with alerts that frighten them, news that agitates them. With this show, we have the time to explain what's going on. These migrants, they've been released. Explain the status that allows them to be released, to slow things down a little bit. What are the big sets of questions for China and its ambitions? Hackers are stepping up their attacks to extort victims. Let's start with easy. Who's attacking? Here's a deeper understanding of what's happening.
I'm thinking about it.
Prime Time with John Dickerson. Stream on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS reports tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The supply of this technology came grinding to a halt. The world would grind to a halt.
Absolutely. As Taiwan faces threats and aggression,
Taiwan is on the front line, and we understand our responsibility as a democracy. We cannot fall.
CBS News examines whether they can defend themselves.
Putin, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, there are manifestations of the battle between autocracy and democracy. And that is a fight that we're all engaged in.
Defending Taiwan, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme,
Massive and rapidly intensifying hurricane.
every second counts.
Hurricane Fiona slams Puerto Rico with flooding and power outages.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Well over 9 feet. This is not survivable.
You'll have time to get prepared.
You want to have the advantage on severe weather days.
It just may save your life.
Feel the forecast. Weather when it matters most on CBS Mornings.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When it comes to the money you spend every day, we have you covered every morning. Making money makes sense. Weekdays on CBS Mornings.
After decades in the public eye and public service, this mother-daughter duo is now talking about gutsy women. What's the gutsiest thing you've ever done? We go person to person with Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton and Chelsea Clinton.
Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Ed O'Keefe. One of the main storylines of this election season has been the rise of candidates who've raised doubts about the validity or integrity of the election. Well, our CBS News political unit conducted a review of the nearly 600 Republicans running for public office nationwide and developed a specific criteria to characterize these kinds of contenders. The most notable are those who explicitly said the 2020 election was stolen, or those that have repeated disproven claims of voter fraud in 2020, those that have supported some kind of post-2020 audit of election results or sought to throw out certain states' electoral votes by lawsuit or congressional vote, or those who haven't given a clear answer to the basic question, was Joe Biden legitimately elected president? So with that, here are the numbers. Among 595 Republicans running for statewide or federal office, that includes governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, secretary of state, U.S. senator, U.S. House, 306 of them have raised doubts about the validity or integrity of the 2020 election. Included in those numbers are 18 of the GOP's 25 U.S. Senate candidates, 238 candidates for U.S. House seats, and 20 of the party's 36 gubernatorial candidates. Notably, just 2 states, Rhode Island and North Dakota, do not have a so-called election denier on the ballot this year. Just 2. Before we go, we want to take a moment to recognize former U.S. Secretary of Defense Ash Carter, who died Monday night after suffering a heart attack. Carter served for 2 years as former President Obama's final defense secretary. He's perhaps best known for opening military combat roles to women and ending the ban on transgender people serving in the armed forces. He spent 35 years working in the halls of the Pentagon in various roles. Ash Carter is survived by his wife Stephanie and their 2 children. He was 68 years old. That does it for today. You can stream Red and Blue Monday to Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern And a reminder, if you want to watch previous episodes of the program, you can see them anytime on the CBS News website. Just head to cbsnews.com/red and blue.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
When folks on the right talk about socialism, it's a boogeyman.
Socialists are always going to promise you free tuition, free healthcare, free everything, but they will never promise you freedom.
I think of socialism as government control.
Wealth is too concentrated at the top right now.
Providing for people the things that they need is actually the world that we were supposed to live in.